Okay, we are recording.
All right. So this is the Career Conversations held by the Academic and Career Advising Office, and this is the career team. I am Molly Spooner. I am the Academic and Career Advising Career Intern.
I'm Louise Ewing. I'm a career advisor.
I'm Kristen Brooks. I'm the Internship Coordinator.
I'm Beverly Behrman, our Bev, and I am also a career advisor.
Great. So I think we will go ahead and get started. Today's career conversation is with Molly, specifically talking about Plan A and Plan B, as she is currently a senior looking for her next steps in her job search after graduation this May. So Molly, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your major, what you're studying, what your career interests are, and what your thoughts are on what you're looking for help with today.
So I am a senior I'm going to get a BA in communications with a minor in public relations. I am looking for possibly higher ed, but I'm open to other possibilities like public relation, or I've also looked at social media content creation jobs in the cities for larger companies. And today I'm just looking for kind of a start to my Plan A, since things have gotten a little crazy. And my plans kind of changed. So I'm looking to create a new Plan A and maybe even a Plan B if my created Plan A today doesn't work out. So I'm just wondering, as a senior who kind of lost track on everything so far, where should I start again? And should I continue applying to jobs? Should I take a break and just work on my resume building? Just kind of figuring out what's next from here.
Great, Molly. Bev or Louise, would one of you like to kind of take the first try at providing feedback to Molly?
Sure. Thanks for your question, Molly. It seems right now we're in uncharted territory, right? Mm-hmm. So I think one of the ideas is to remain flexible, as difficult as that might be. I can tell you the little bit of what I have been seeing is that some of the bigger employers are still recruiting. So, companies that have, thousands of employees like Northwestern Mutual are, Black Diamond. Some of these bigger companies are better prepared to storm the weather, if you will. The smaller companies, that remains to be seen. So we don't know what's going on with that. One recommendation I would do is stay tuned in to LinkedIn and really keep up on what's happening on LinkedIn. Look at your industries. Higher ed is still going to exist after this. What it's going to look like might be slightly different. Colleges and universities might be taking a hit all across the boards with enrollment. But I would keep on with higher ed, especially if you want to go into higher ed. They're always recruiting. There are always entry-level positions for people who have a bachelor's degree. And I would keep my eye on that. It might take a year for that to happen, but don't ignore it. Keep your finger on the pulse. Louise.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And one of the things you had asked, Molly, was should you pause and do something else? And I would say if you see positions posted that are interesting to you, definitely go ahead and apply, because you don't know what employers are thinking about or how they're going to be adjusting. And even if they put a pause on the hiring, you still will have that resume in their system should they start opening it up again. In addition, you should also be working on your resume. You should be doing those other things at the same time. And I agree with Bev about the LinkedIn piece, that even if employers aren't hiring right now, this is a great time to start that networking piece of who in your connections or what Keene State College alumni are out there that currently work in higher ed or work in social media marketing. This is a good time to start doing things like informational interviews and just saying, while we're waiting for these positions to get posted, I'd love to know more about what you have been doing and what should I be thinking about when it starts picking up again in terms of marketing myself? And what are the industries that are kind of on an upward trajectory that I should be thinking about as well?
I would encourage you, Molly, to also maybe create 2, possibly even 3 different resumes. So one is going to be geared towards higher ed. One might be geared towards social media. And then whatever the other one plan, if you will, looks like we've got plan A, B, and C, right? We got higher ed, social media, and then C remains to be known, not yet discovered quite at this point. But you know, really differentiating your resumes that you're ready to apply to these jobs when they're posted. And I would even encourage you or any student right now to do a very thorough self-inventory on your skills, your experiences, and really demonstrate and be able to articulate. Because I work with students all the time. I just worked with a student this week, and she forgot to put her internship from Big Brother, Big Sister on there, and she wants to go into nonprofits. And I said, wait a second, your internship isn't on your resume. And she's like, oh yeah, that's right. So I would encourage students to make appointments with us, and then also use our online resources, and then, you know, join groups on LinkedIn, etc.
Yeah, and I love that too, that really this is a good time to kind of reacquaint yourself with all the things that you've done, what you know, what your skills are. Employers are not looking just for paid experience, they're looking at experience and skills. And some of the things that I've been reading lately is it's really good to also think about your transferable skills, because you may be targeting higher ed, but another area might come up and you have a lot of transferable skills related to that. So like when I say transferable skills, are there things that come to mind for you from your experience?
I think one thing that I do really struggle with when creating resumes is actually putting down what I've done. When I create a resume, I kind of go blank and I just think about the general things that I've done. So not immediately. Creating a resume kind of stresses me out because I feel like I just forget a bunch of stuff. So.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment? I think it's important when you're thinking about transferable skills. So what are some of the critical skills that you've gained, whether it be through some of your internship opportunities that would transfer maybe from higher ed to social media and marketing to any other type of industry? So some of those could be organization, time management, problem solving, attention to detail, all those skills that you can talk about in each one of those industries. So I think I always mention to students, think about those skills that you have, and also think of examples of how you can talk about those skills specifically and apply them and give examples of how you're organized or how you deal with time management, all of those things. So be ready to talk an example, because employers are going to want to know how you've utilized those skills.
Yeah, and I would say when you think about your internship right now, you're doing a lot for us, and it's not only requiring knowledge of social media and event planning, and those are hard skills, but when I think about the transferable skills of you having to work independently, you have to kind of juggle a bunch of different things that we're throwing at you. Your adaptability, your flexibility, the ability to work under stress. There are so many, and those skills will translate to any job that you're going to be applying to.
So can I ask a question for everyone, for Bev and Louise, and it's kind of on behalf of Molly, and I'm also curious to know the answer. So say Molly continues with her plans to apply for opportunities in higher education as well as social media marketing. So what happens if she doesn't hear back? What if it comes really close to graduation? She's really looking to be hired sometime in May. Then what? What do we suggest that she do from there if she's not hearing back or there isn't any response in regards to the applications that she submitted? What are some other options that she could be exploring?
Well, one thing I would say is I would just check in with the employer. in a kind way, understanding that they're under a lot of stress. And just to kind of say, I just wanted to check on my application, the status of my application, and just to see where things are at, knowing that they may have put a pause on it. But then I guess there are, and we can maybe show our resources a little bit on our website, that there are different ways of finding part-time jobs or temporary jobs to kind of pay the bills and explore things. But I would even start with, Molly, like in the worst case scenario, you don't have that job when you graduate. What do you have, like, do you have a sense of what you might be wanting to do to fill that time?
I mean, as of now, I have my job in the summer that I normally do that I took again just as a backup plan in case jobs aren't being successful, which in light of everything that's going on, I'm kind of glad that I did that. And it's just a backup plan. It's definitely not my number one. It's just to make sure that I have a steady cash flow over the summer so that I can continue to apply to jobs. And if I do need to move somewhere besides Connecticut, where I'm from, that I have the financial means to do that. So that's kind of where I'm headed right now for the summer.
And that's great, because even in doing that, as long as you recognize that, sometimes I think people might beat themselves up saying, I just graduated and I'm doing this. And all you're doing is you're giving yourself some time, which you can then start doing the networking and the informational interviewing and the job search for where you want to head. That gives you a little bit of comfort.
Right.
I would add a couple things too. Look at your timeline. I think the timeline's going to be very disrupted after this. We don't know what will happen. There might be a surge in hiring with everybody getting back to work, if you will. Higher ed in general is pretty well known for taking a long time. Nonprofits can take a long time too. There's a lot of committee, a lot of meetings, committee work, decision making that goes on. So it's not unusual that it can take 3 months, when not more. And I think all three of us can pretty much attest to the long process of hiring in higher ed. And that sort of spills over into nonprofits as well. You'll see for-profit hiring can tend to be a lot quicker. So just know that there are different timelines for different industries. The other thing too is that, like I said before, we don't know, there might be a hiring surge. So maybe there's interesting temp work. And like I said before, maybe this is something, maybe you're not going to get a position in higher ed for this coming school year, but it might happen next year. It's not to say to not pursue it though. Always pursue plan A, right? You want to pursue plan A, and then you also want to keep in mind plan B. The other thing too is some of these other jobs, while it's not necessarily going to become your career, they can be decent jobs with good money, right? So I think about restaurant workers, right? They can easily make a few $100 a night. I'm imagining when this is all said and done, people are going to want to go out to eat like crazy, right? I think, restaurants are going to get a big surge.
Yeah.
We've all had our plan Bs too. I have worked in, believe it or not, the construction industry, and I've done carpentry and house painting where money is pretty good. So in between my quote unquote professional jobs, I leaned on that ability to work in the construction industry and make money to keep myself afloat.
Yeah, when I graduated with a BA in music and moved from Ohio to Boston, and I had never lived in the city, and I moved with some friends, so everything was insane. And I had no idea what to do with my major. I had no idea what transferable skills were. And I even went to a temp agency, which is a temp agency is basically maybe a company has a temporary assignment, or someone is out and they need someone to fill in, or it's a temp to hire. And I took a test on alphabetizing and I failed it. As a college graduate, because I was so anxious. But really the point I'm trying to make is that I had some awful assignments and I had some good assignments, but then I had an assignment where I ended up working for Joseph Kennedy and a nonprofit oil company called Citizens Energy. And I did it for 3 years. And it was an amazing experience. And the only reason I got it was I just was open, and an opportunity came along when I was temping. And so, yes, I agree with Bev, absolutely pursue plan A and be open with all those other options too, because you just follow multiple paths because you don't know where something is going to lead.
Mm-hmm. I'm definitely not closed off to other opportunities outside of higher ed. I really do like marketing. I do like, because marketing goes over, I think, social media, because social media kind of goes under marketing. It's a way that you market towards people. And then I'm really into public relations. It's my minor, and I think that stuff is really interesting. So I'm definitely not closed off to any other possibilities. But I think another question I would have is, since I'm not kind of dead set on just one place right now, and I do want to get my master's, I'm just wondering, like, at this point in my life, if there's something specific to get for a master's, if I did end up wanting to work in, I mean, I do want to work in higher ed at the end of all this, but if, I guess in the interim, like I work somewhere else and then work up to higher ed, would there be a desired master to have, or kind of what? That's one of my questions I've been having, is like what to choose.
I think we can all talk about the master's degrees that we have. A lot of times it's not one specific type of master degree that you have, but to advance in higher ed, you will need a master's degree at some point. There
Right.
are plenty of entry-level positions for recent graduates in higher ed, but if you want to advance in a professional capacity, quite often, more not than others, you will need to have a master's. So actually, Kristen, why don't you start, because you're the most recent of the graduates here.
Yeah, sure. So I have my master's in leadership with a concentration in human resources. And at that time, at deciding where I wanted to go, I wasn't looking at higher ed as my route. I was really focused and in the profession of human resources and recruitment and employer relations. So I was spending a lot of my time in human resources. So hence why I wanted to get my master's in that. But so much of what I learned getting my master's in leadership and human resources is so transferable to higher ed and to the role that I'm currently doing. So if I were to go back, I would get it again in that, just because it's so focused on, you know, career recruitment. A lot of what I learned in my master's program is so relatable to what I'm currently doing in my role as internship coordinator. There are programs, I've had friends and colleagues that have gone for their master's in higher education administration, and that's helpful. And I don't know, Bev or Louise, if either of you could speak to that, but I think it's also important to, specifically for my role, to have that outside knowledge of recruitment, human resources, leadership, rather than just specifically the higher education track. So at the time that I went, I wasn't thinking about higher education. I was thinking about the profession that I wanted to be in and my kind of skill set in regards to recruitment.
Right. So my mom, you know, she works in education. She's a principal. She has her master's in leadership. And I had a conversation about, because I do want to work professionally in education, especially in higher education. So I asked her like kind of what it was and how it's benefited her. And she said basically kind of the same thing. She really enjoyed it. She got a different feel for a bunch of different things. But if, in her opinion, she said, if you want to excel higher in any education field, leadership is a really good master's to have. So that's kind of where I was leaning towards, but I wasn't quite sure, because I definitely want to get my master's and I definitely want to end up in higher education. I love the professional world around colleges and the different colleges, campus feels that you get and stuff like that. So I know where I want to end up.
And I think, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I don't mean to keep interrupting you,
no,
but I think it's also important. I've told this to students. Some students are really dead set on going to grad school as soon as they finish their undergraduate. We speak with so many students who are psychology majors and want to go on to get their master's immediately following graduation, so that way they can get into social work. But sometimes you know, they're not out in the field practicing social work or mental health work until they get to their master's program. And then they realize, oh, wait, I don't want to do this. So I think with that caveat, I got my master's, I applied and was accepted in less than a year of graduating from Keene State. And looking back, while I loved my master's program, I wish I would have just spent a little more time getting some real world experience to figure out, maybe I would have specialized in something other than human resources, but that was just my job at the time. So I thought, yes, this is what I want to do. And I'm so happy that I got the leadership specifically. But, you know, I think thinking about it, because getting your master's is a big decision, and really taking some time to think about, well, what are some areas that I really am interested in and want to specialize in. But I enjoyed working and going to school for my master's at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll let Bev and Louise chime in about this.
I'll go.
Go ahead on mute.
Louise,
And the one thing I would say, because I think it's a really good question about the graduate degree. Sometimes people may feel like if you're graduating into a potential recession, that the best thing, there may not be many jobs, so you should probably go on and get a graduate degree. And I would discourage students from thinking about that unless they are completely 100% certain that that degree is what is going to help them get to where they want to go. Because I've seen it where students have gone straight into graduate programs. They feel like, well, there's nothing out there, so I'm going to do this. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of money. And then they came out on the other side and they went, well, I don't really want to do that either. And I still can't find a job. So if anyone feels that they're at that point, really that's the time to come and talk to us so we can sort it out with you. So, but Molly, you sound clear. You sound like, yeah, I really want to go to higher ed. So that makes total sense. And it sounds like you're getting good advice from your mom, and what Kristen is saying. I got my master's of social work, not because I wanted to go in higher ed. Higher ed wasn't even on my radar. I wanted to be a clinical social worker, and I went back when I was in my 30s to get my graduate degree. So I kind of took some time and wandered, but those experiences helped me clarify that this is what I want to do. And I got I got a graduate degree that gave me a ton of flexibility that allowed me to be able to get this job within higher ed. So that was another way of doing it.
I was very specific. I had started out in education as a secondary social studies teacher. And I realized after having taught English in Japan for 3 years right out of undergrad, just after graduation, that I really wanted to work in some kind of capacity with some kind of international exchange, student exchange. And I knew that specifically I wanted to work, I wanted to keep working in education, and very specifically wanted to work in higher ed. And so I went back to school at 31 years old, and there's a international school called the School for International Training in Brattleboro, Vermont, and that's where I went to get my master's degree. I got an MA in international education, and so that's how I got mine, which was very specific to working in a higher ed scenario. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of leadership programs out there that you can work in a higher ed capacity. Like Kristen was saying, there are more generalized leadership programs, and then there are some very specific ones to working in higher ed. So I would just say really do your research, because it's yet another financial and time commitment, and you want to make sure that you're making the right decision, because it's not like undergrad where you go for a semester and you're like, oh, I don't really like it here, and I'm going to transfer out after a year. A lot of programs might be 1 year intensive, or a year and a half or 2 years. A lot of programs won't let you transfer credits, are very, very, maybe up to, I think 9 is the most I've ever seen. Who knows what will happen after, if things will change after COVID, we don't know. But really you want to make sure that you're picking the program that you really want to be in. And especially you want to look at any type of graduate assistantships that will pay for your tuition and give you a stipend as well.
Mhm. I think right now, I definitely don't think I want to jump right into my master's. I think I want to get some experience first so I can, because I feel pretty confident now with where I want to go after I graduate, but I just want to be able to get some sort of higher education entry-level experience to really solidify to myself, at least, that this is where I want to be, and then jump into my master's. But also, it is a questionable time, so will I be able to be granted that opportunity to have experience? So I think that's where, not even just myself, I think a lot of seniors are in the same shoes where, we don't want to put thousands more dollars into a master's program in a time of uncertainty, but we also don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. So it's kind of like, what do we do? So
I think that goes back to what Louise and Bev were both saying.
Mhm.
Take a look at other options around temporary, even seasonal work. There may be potentially, again, we don't really know what's going to happen with the COVID situation, and if there's any opportunity for any part-time work in higher education, maybe just to kind of get your foot in the door with some sort of institution. And I don't know if Bev or Louise are familiar with any kind of temporary or part-time work in higher education.
I wonder if this might be a good time to share screen of our two things. One of our job search resources, as well as the screen on the page on informational interviewing, because I think that would be the other piece, is reaching out and starting to ask people questions through, like, having conversations. By developing those relationships, if they start hearing about opportunities, there's a better chance that they may be thinking of you, having had that conversation. So maybe, should we start with the...
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So if someone wants to just walk me through, I will go to our academic and career advising page.
Can I just tell a short little story while we're getting there?
Yes, of course.
Molly, there's a person, she used to be our colleague. Her name is Phoebe Price. Her daughter graduated from Colby Sawyer, and the admissions office at Keene needed somebody short term. 1 semester turned into 2 semesters. 2 semesters turned into almost 2 years. So I think her name's Izzy, and I'll give you her contact information later. But I think it would be great to talk to her about how she worked her network, and she was able to get a job, temporary at Keene, but it landed her a full-time recruiting job at Colby Sawyer, her alma mater.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I would love that contact information.
Yep.
She'd be great to talk to. Yeah. Kristen, if you just want to scroll down a little bit on our page, and it is under career advising, it's job searches in that first sentence under, yes. So these are online resources. So on the top here are just kind of general, with LinkedIn being really number one. Mm-hmm. And we'll return to some of these, but I just wanted to go down a little bit. So we did some research. So recruiting firms, that's basically recruiting staffing agencies. So any of these firms contract with employers, and employers, again, either maybe they have a project they need someone to work on, or someone is out and they need someone to fill in, or they're doing a temporary to permanent hiring process. And so we pulled together some of the major ones and some of the local ones. There's one called Creative Circle that's really for more creatives like graphic design, marketing, and advertising. And I think a lot of times with these recruiting staffing firms, when it starts picking up again, employment, they may start through recruiting firms just to get, They're just getting a sense of how many people can they hire, what are their needs. And so this is a good way to get a foot in the door. And a lot of these firms are national. So if a student is going someplace else, other than like Masiello and TPI, which is local, and Letty Group, the others are national.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you scroll down a little bit more, this is a whole new realm for me, certainly, this whole remote work. But right now, the COVID-19 is not going anywhere. Even if people start hiring again, there's probably going to be moments of remote work, a greater need for remote work. And so some of the resources under remote work, it's working for a particular company. So you're employed by the company, but you're working remotely.
Can I just add, Molly, specifically for higher ed, look at higheredjobs.com.
Yeah, I have, Jen told me about that
Good.
a couple months ago. Yeah.
I kind of lost my connection, sorry. And then the final thing is the gig, the freelance and the gig. So that's for people who you're just looking for some standalone jobs. You're just looking for something where you can work on a project and then it's done, you're paid by job. So those are some additional resources as part of that plan B while you're working on plan A to get some income. Are there other things that Kristen or Bev you want to say about some of the top links under resources?
Yeah, Idealist. So I know a lot of students want to work in the nonprofit sector. Idealist.org is a really good one. I will say Idealist is far more urban friendly than rural friendly. They are really good if you're looking at cities like Boston or New York City or Burlington, Vermont, New Haven, Connecticut, etc. They're very good at listing nonprofits, and you can research by jobs, you can research by organizations, etc. So that's another one I would recommend. Obviously, Indeed.com, we still use that a lot too, but I would really emphasize LinkedIn is making some very strong headroads in the past year in terms of using that. Recruiters are using it far more. I think it's going to surpass Indeed at some point in the not too distant future. In addition to the jobs posted and conducting a job search, one thing that I would really try to emphasize, and I know it's going to be very hard, is that we just need to be patient and flexible, and it's just probably going to take more time than anticipated, and it's a very unfortunate situation, but that's all we can do, really.
Can I ask a question of Bev and Louise? What can either of you speak to, and this is more of just a general comment, there are other search engines out there like ZipRecruiter, other search engines or third-party search engines. Do you have thoughts on that? As sometimes that'll be the first thing that pops up when I go to do a Google search in jobs in Boston, Massachusetts. So could you speak to any of those recruiting sites?
Yeah, I can't. So what I would say is, right now, LinkedIn is the gold standard. Like that should be the one that everyone is using. And it's so powerful because it's got the social media networking aspect to it. And if you think about job search, 20% of your time you're going onto websites and hunting for jobs, and 80% of your time you're beginning to talk to people and having conversations. So maybe pick a couple of specific websites, like a LinkedIn or an Indeed. There are going to be new ones, like ZipRecruiter is really making a push for it. And I haven't really used ZipRecruiter that much, but sure, try it. But don't feel like you have to go on a bunch of different websites like that, because at a certain point, they're all going to intersect. And if you're going to pick another job board, in addition to like a LinkedIn or an Indeed or ZipRecruiter, I would go for something that's professionally focused. Like professional associations a lot of times have job postings related to a specific area. But don't make yourself crazy, because there's always going to be a new thing in town. just go with something, but really spend some time beginning to talk to people. Bev, you
Yeah,
have
I
something
would
to add?
say, yeah, I would agree with Louise. There are a lot of new things. Sort of one of the things I've discovered in career advising or career counseling, if you will, is that there's always something new, there's always something better. And I would just really stick to what's been, traditionally used. I mean, I would personally, I would stick to LinkedIn and Indeed, and then Ideal is for nonprofits. You're just going to constantly see new competitors coming in and trying to take away market. It's not to say if you go on ZipRecruiter and you like it and it works for you, then by all means go ahead and do that. But I would stick with the more established ones that really have been proven per se.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I would add to that is I think at this point, everyone's trying to compete with LinkedIn. And I have a feeling that like something like ZipRecruiter is as well. And so, yeah, as Bev said, if it works for you, great, but also understand that they're all kind of competing to be the new LinkedIn, I think.
Great, thank you for answering that kind of off-topic question, but I think it is something that comes up as to, what there are so many search engines out there. What should students and soon-to-be graduates really spend their time focusing on? So I know that we're coming up to our time. So Molly, I want to just ask you, do you have any kind of final thoughts, specific questions? I mean, do you feel like this has helped and will give you kind of some next steps for your own career search? And I guess how can we help you more too?
I got basically the underlining question marks answered. I have a clear understanding of, how my plan A has changed and how, I want to get that experience. And before I go get my master's, I want to see if this is the route that I actually am for sure wanting to go. And I think just getting somebody to say yes to me in the future would work. So yeah, I don't have any more questions, but thank you guys.
Yeah. Bev, Louise, any other final thoughts before we wrap it up with Molly?
No, this was great.
So you had to come say hello.
No, but
Molly, those were really good questions, and I hope we work with you so closely, so hopefully other students will use.
And we really do. Your resume looks great. We just need to fine tune it.
Yeah.
So, and that didn't come up in the discussion, but if it starts feeling like everything is getting overloaded and requiring immediate attention and everything is feeling equal, it would be really good to just say, I'm going to set aside a half hour a day.
Mm-hmm.
And that half hour a day is just somehow or another chipping away at my resume so it doesn't keep moving down to the bottom. And once that half hour is up, you can go back to doing other things, but then you'll feel like you're slowly chipping away at the various things that need to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because I keep wanting to add more and I keep thinking about it. And then I'm like, oh no, I got to do 8 other things for my 4 other classes that I have. And then I'm like, oh my God, I haven't looked at my resume in a week. And it just becomes a bottom of the list on my priorities, and which is kind of silly because it's what I need to apply to the jobs that I'm applying to, but then I don't think about fine tuning it. I'm just sending it out. And then I'm like, oh God, I needed to add 2 more things and I didn't even think about it. So I think that's a good idea to just every day make sure that it's looking exactly the way that I want it to. So then
treat it like a class.
Treat it like exactly. We tell, you're in the ideal situation right now in that you're only in 3 classes.
Mm-hmm.
And so treat the job search as your 4th class.
Right.
How many hours a week do you dedicate to each class? Is it 10, 12?